All right, what's going on, everybody? I hope everyone is doing well out there today. It's a beautiful day here in California. So what I have going on is I need to do a rewind spring replacement on a Stihl 201 TC. This one here, the TC is the M-Tronic version of the 201Ts. And so I just figured this would be a good opportunity to show you the process of how to install the rewind spring. One thing to keep in mind is that all rewind springs are slightly different as far as how they get installed, and that's just some may be a little trickier than others. And other than that, the only other thing that I can say as just a small piece of advice is you want to do your best to go into this job when you feel like you have a good level of patience and focus, because this is one job that you do not want to rush through. Because, and not to intimidate you, because I know you can do this job, you don't want to rush it, because one small wrong move and you will find yourself in a situation of disaster. But I'll show you what that's like once we get started with the job. But other than that, there are a few things that you need before you do this job. So of course, you're going to need your replacement rewind spring. This is the part number that I will be using for this 201. And then you are going to need a few tools. So hemostatic clamps, it's a surgical clamp, a blade, small flathead screwdriver, some pliers, a lighter, and a T27 driver. Of course, you can go a little fancier and you can use a subcompact driver with a T27 bit. But if you are going to use a power tool, always make sure to start with the lowest torque setting first. And if you do need a little more juice, you could always bump it up. But always want to start off with the lowest torque setting first, because you do not want to strip or damage anything. So other than that, once you have your supplies, we can go ahead and get started. So first thing we want to do is remove the fan housing to get access to the rewind assembly by removing the 4 T27 screws. So let's go ahead and get those removed. Let me move the camera over a little bit. So let's go ahead and get these removed. So this is the second time that I've had to do this on a 201. The first one I did was actually fairly simple. I was really surprised. I don't do these often, so we'll see how this one goes. And I'll show you something about this hardware. It'll just help you when you go to reassemble it. Oops. Okay. So there is our fan housing, and here is our rewind assembly. So this is all that you need. So we can just go ahead and put this 201 off to the side for now. Not necessary, but if you do have one of these magnetic trays would also be nice to have, just so that way you can put all your hardware, and that way you don't have your hardware, falling off your table or your bench. But one thing about this hardware for the fan housing is you're going to have 2 fine thread screws and 2 self-tap. So the fine thread screws are going to go into the crankcase. The self-tap thread style screws are going to go into your housing, your tank housing. So the fine threads are going to go into your crankcase, the front, and the self-tap style threads are going to go into your tank housing. So that's just something that I learned over time. So like I said, these magnetic trays are pretty nice because everything just sticks. So this is what we're going to be working on today. So this is the rope rotor, and the rewind spring sits right underneath the rope rotor. So once you remove your fan housing, you're going to find your rewind assembly. You're also going to have access to, you're also going to see your pawl, this clip here, and it's also going to have a washer. So let's go ahead and remove those. So right now, so take your pliers and remove the clip. Sometimes they refer to these as springs, but to me it's a clip. And then once you remove the clip, you can remove your pawl and your washer. You can put those over on your tray, or if you don't have a tray, that's perfectly fine. It's not necessary. So this is where things can go wrong if we weren't replacing the rewind spring. So you have your rope rotor, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, but right here where this T27 is, that's holding down the rewind spring. So let's say, for instance, you take off your fan housing to do a pull start job, which this one's going to need one soon. It could use one now, but we don't have I don't have any extra pull cord. So let's say you were just doing a rewind starter job and you didn't know that you didn't have to remove the rope rotor. So I'm going to put on some safety glasses here. So let's say you're doing a rewind starter job and you didn't know that you don't have to remove the rope rotor. So now we can go ahead and slide it off, as you can see. So underneath this rope rotor, there's like a little notch or a little groove where part of the rewind spring kind of, how would I say, it sits in place. So if you didn't know, and this is where things will go wrong. So if you didn't know that there's going to be some tension and it's going to be basically attached inside that little groove, you're going to pull out your rope rotor, and as you can see, that's your rewind spring. So if you didn't know and you just go ahead and pull it off, that's the disaster I was talking about, and that's what's going to happen. Thankfully though, in this case, we're replacing the spring, so today it's okay. But just keep in mind that this little end will kind of hook to the bottom of your rope rotor. So if you are going to take off the rope rotor for whatever reason, just make sure that it's not sitting in that little spot. So you just have to kind of move it around and wiggle it, but you don't want to just pull it off, because this will happen. So now that we have the spring out, what you're going to do next is you're going to go ahead and remove that T27 to get the rest of the spring out. And there you go. T27. So just go ahead and wind this back up into the rotor, just to kind of keep things a little more neat. So now you're gonna have access to be able to put in the new rewind spring. So what I like to do, I just like to look to see if there's any dirt or anything building up on the border, and if there is, just go ahead and clean it out, but it looks good to me. So now we can go ahead and install the new rewind spring. Same thing though. So if you notice, there's a plastic casing around it holding the rewind spring in place. Be very careful when opening this, because again, if the rewind spring slips out of place it's just going to come flying out. So just be very careful when handling this. See, like already I opened it and part of the sticker lifted part of the little hanger there, and you don't want that to happen because that's all it takes. So just kind of looks like this one won't sit in place, so just hold it. I'm going to just hold it there and remove the plastic. And this is what it's going to look like. So you got to be very careful when handling this, because like I said, if it starts moving out of place any ever so slightly, it can just come springing out. Just like this piece right here, it's coming out. So that's all it could take. This piece can come out and the whole thing's going to come out. So if you notice, there's the plastic casing, all right? And it's going to have the same shape as the fan housing. So here and around there. So, and I wish I had a better way to show this, and I'm sorry, I don't. But you just want to align everything to everything inside the fan housing. So okay, so I have everything in line like so. So from here, as you notice, it has these openings here. So the way that I do it, and maybe this is the way it's designed, or maybe that's why it's designed the way it is, this is where your flathead's going to come in play. So while you have it down like this, I always start with the top here. Where is it? I'm going to start by seating it in place here and just work around it using the little openings here. So sit it in place, sit it in place there. Okay, once you feel that you have sat it in place all the way around the fan housing, you should be able to just take off the little plastic casing and everything, and the spring will be sitting in place. But even then, just go around carefully and make sure it's actually sitting in place. And right away, you're going to go ahead and grab your T27 and put it back in its place. But remember, just because you put in this T27 does not mean that the spring is going to be secure. It's only just going to be secure from that top right there, from that point. Okay? But for the most part, it's in. Now, we're going to wind this back up. And the same thing, remember, it's going to have that little notch. So you're just going to play around with it until you feel it sit into place. And there you go. But even then, be careful. You're still not done. So now, we're going to put our washer in first. Then from there, the pawl. And then lastly, the clip. The clip sometimes gives me a little trouble but this one looks like it's going to be just fine. Okay. And now your rewind assembly is assembled. Okay. Now you can just go ahead and pop the fan housing back on. So remembering that the fine thread screws are going to go into the crankcase or into the front, whichever way helps you remember. And then the self-tap threads are going to go into the tank housing. You want to give them a good hand snug, but not too tight. You don't want to strip anything. And then we have one more. Give it a nice little hand snug. Okay, here we are. And now you're ready for action. Oh, or not. Hold on a second. Let's see what happened here. Should have probably checked to see if we were aligned before I put the fan housing on. It's all good. Just making the video a little more interesting. But essentially, though, that's how you do it. It seems like in this case, I didn't have to use the blade or the lighter or the clamps, because the last 201 that I did, I had to shorten the cord just a little bit. Or of course, you could always just do a new rewind job on it, or a new rewind, I should say. Okay, so what's going on here? So the pawl so it looks like there's an issue with the pawl, which is this little black piece here. So when you pull the cord, it opens up and it catches onto the flywheel. I must have put the clamp in, or the clip in wrong, possibly. Let's see. Party foul. There we go. So what I did wrong is I put this clip in the wrong way. So there is a right and wrong way to put it in. So now As you can see, it's opening and closing. So there is a right and wrong way to put it on. So I just had it on the wrong way. But the right way to do this is when you put your fan housing on, make sure that it's catching. That's the more, I would say, proper way to do it. And since we are doing it over again, I am going to apply some Loctite. So I use the red just when going into metal. So I'm going to put some on the screws that go into the crankcase, just for a little extra security. But that's good that that happened, because it's all part of the learning process, and now I've learned something that I just need to, that's another thing I should have checked too, instead of just assuming that I got it right. So hopefully we've all learned something here. And like I said, all rewind springs are a little different when it comes to installing. Some are going to be trickier than others. I'm sure there's people out there that just have a way of doing them all. They just know how to do it. But these 201s are, you know, been getting lucky, but they're pretty simple. And again, like I said, I didn't have to use the lighter or the blade or the clamps, because for this cord I didn't have to shorten it up at all. I was able to sit the rope rotor onto the spring and it still maintained tension. So now we should be all good to go. So yeah, that's how you do a rewind spring on a 201. Thanks for watching. Laters.